Firefighters let woman's house burn after realizing what was inside. It often happens that we see situations in life that do not really make sense. Kevin experienced a similar situation some time ago. His neighbor often slept in the car, and Kevin wondered why his neighbor Ruth lived and slept in her car when she had a house only yards away. As friendly as she was, Kevin had never seen the woman go into her house. Let's dive into the story of an old woman. But before we start, don't forget to hit the like button and also subscribe to our channel to get some interesting stuff. Kevin felt sad by the fact that Ruth lived and slept in her car. He knew that there had to be a reason for choosing to sleep in her own driveway instead of her home. Kevin could tell that her situation embarrassed Ruth whenever he passed by and looked in her car. However, he couldn't figure out why she would be. She owned her own home and her own car. She'd retired and everything seemed fine. She seemed to have a good life, so what was going on? It was easy to see something was wrong when you looked at her house. All the windows had the blinds closed, and the house wasn't in the best state of repairs. One day, Kevin was walking past her car when he heard Ruth crying. He immediately ran to check on her and found her desperately looking through the plastic bags in the backseat of her car. "What's wrong?" Kevin asked Ruth. Ruth looked at him, and when she spoke, the mystery of her home was solved. As Ruth looked over her belongings in her car, she took a mental count of what she had with her. When she made the choice to leave her home she had lived in to start living out of her car, she gathered the objects that meant the most to her. But she soon discovered that she left one very important object inside. When Kevin Burns saw Ruth searching through her belongings, he wondered if an item had gone missing. Ruth soon made this apparent. She stopped fumbling long enough to point a finger towards her home. "In the house," Ruth said with tears in her eyes. "I left it in the house." Ruth seemed afraid to even step foot into her home and away from the safety of her car, which wasn't even mobile anymore. She then questioned Burns. "Maybe you can go inside and get it?" He was up for the challenge and to finally find out what he'd been wanting to know for months. What was in that house that Ruth had to escape from? Kevin took the task on himself and told Ruth that he would venture into the home to find Ruth's precious belongings. Kevin found out that she was looking for a photo of her parents that was left inside the house. As Kevin started walking towards the house, the sight of broken roof tiles on the front lawn made him look up in terror. How long had the roof had a hole in it? Ruth told Burns that what she was looking for was an old photo of her parents. When Burns entered the house, it was immediately apparent to him that the house was unlivable for anyone. There were piles of trash on the floors that made it hard to pass from one room to the next without holding onto the walls. And the large piles of garbage emitted a smell that was hard to bear. Out of the kindness of his heart, Kevin agreed to find Ruth's lost photo, but he now desperately wanted to get out of the house. But his curiosity got the best of him as he walked through the house. Was it possible that he could ever find one single photograph in this mountain of things? Kevin covered his nose as he stepped through the room, suddenly afraid of the quality of the air in the house. Obviously, no one had stepped foot in the house in weeks, but Burns wondered just how long it had been in this condition. Living in a car seemed like a much better option than trying to navigate this house. If Burns expected to find the photo, he needed to start somewhere. So he picked a pile of papers that seemed to be on the older side and started to go through them. He expected his search to take hours if he continued at this rate. After looking through one pile of papers and finding nothing of importance, Kevin shoved it to his side and took a glance to his right. There were still dozens of piles of papers, magazines, and files that could be hiding the photo he was searching for. So slowly but surely, he continued his search through the relics. When Burns picked up an old book, he knew he was getting closer to what he was looking for. The book was kept in a box with other sentimental objects like an old trophy and a framed diploma. The box had noticeably less dust than most of the other objects in the room. Sure enough, with some more digging, Burns found what he had come in to find. But would he be able to make his way out of the house? Luckily, the photo that was so important to Ruth was one of the few things that was left in immaculate condition. The photo was yellowed and faded, but still in great condition, considering that the rest of the house was so poorly taken care of. With the photo in hand, Burns was ready to leave the house as fast as he had entered. But then he saw an old, decrepit bookcase. The bookcase was an odd sight to see. It was pulled slightly to one side, where Burns could see a gaping hole in the wall behind it. He knew he would never have this opportunity again, so he pushed the shelves out of the way further to make his way into the room. That's when he would see something he never expected. It was obvious that this hole was an entry to another room, but why was it sealed and hidden behind a bookshelf? Was there another entrance to the room that was blocked somewhere else? If this was the main entryway, it would be difficult to crawl into it every time someone needed to get inside. The entryway was filthy, and the cobwebs made it obvious that no one had stepped foot in this room for a very long time. Unlike the rest of the house, the room that Burns had just uncovered was in great condition. Although the room had low lighting, it was obvious to see the colored photos that lined the walls, seemingly very important to whoever stayed in this room last. The room was filled with old toys and clothes, and as Burns looked over the one clean room in the house, he wondered who this room once belonged to that Ruth felt the need to keep it in great condition. It was obvious to Burns that this house was not safe to be in without the appropriate gear to protect his respiratory system. When Burns left the house, he immediately let Ruth know that her home wasn't safe. After hearing the information about the mold, Ruth said, "I had no idea it had gotten so bad." The two agreed to let a specialist into the home to clear out the mold. Burns also wanted to mention the room that hadn't been touched in years to Ruth because he was dying for answers. After a visit, the specialist let Ruth know that the only option left was to demolish the house, but in a way that wouldn't pose a danger to neighbors or the workmen who would have to bring it down. There was only one option, and it would mean that there wouldn't be anything left of Ruth's house in the morning. The crew who visited the house told Ruth that her situation was the worst they had ever seen, and that the mold couldn't be cleaned without posing a serious danger to everyone involved. So the fire department was called in. In this strange circumstances, they wouldn't be putting out any fires, they'd be starting one. But before the house could be demolished, most of the objects inside had to be removed and taken to a dump. Sadly, because of the high levels of mold inside the home, very few things could be saved, and it would be a health hazard to keep anything that had been near the mold. With the help of the fire department and some volunteers, Ruth's belongings were able to be moved from the house to the yard where it would be packed up and trucked away. And Ruth's reaction to the large scope of work took everyone by surprise. After the belongings were out of the house, the fire department could do a final check and prepare to demolish the house. The entire team of Ruth's small town came out to the site to lend a hand clearing the area before they started demolition. She broke down in tears when it was finally time to say goodbye to the home, but she thanked each and every member of the fire department and cleanup crew who helped move her things and helped her get on with her life. Before the house was burnt down, a final check through the house was done by the fire department. The fire department agreed to burn down the house because it was in the best interest of the homeowner. And Ruth already knew that she had everything she needed to survive packed in the car she'd been living in for the past few weeks. In a way, getting rid of that house would be a burden off her shoulders. But now that her house was gone, where would Ruth go? After witnessing the total destruction of the home she built and lived her life in, where would she go? Surely the car she was sleeping in wasn't to be her final home. Luckily, the friends she'd made in her life would jump at the chance to help her. With all of her vital belongings packed up in her car, Kevin helped her set out on finding a place to live. A nearby community for senior citizens seemed to be the best bet for this old woman. Ruth was long overdue to stay somewhere welcoming and inviting, with plenty of people to talk to. The senior living community welcomed Ruth with open arms, although she was obviously still dealing with the death of her husband. Ruth felt better to be around her peers and have a place to live where her needs would be met without fear. It just took the support of a few local friends and their honesty to change her situation and make her life better in her twilight years. That's all about today's story. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and share the video with your friends, and we'll see you soon.